Hi, everybody. Welcome to the April 7th edition of Collect Our Cousins, Engaging White People in the Struggle for Full Democracy. I'm Karen Fleshman, founder of Racy Conversations, and I'm so delighted today to have my dear friend Lynne Maureen Hurdle on the show. I just want to read a little bit about why I created this show. I created Collect Our Cousins, Engaging White Americans in the Struggle for Full Democracy to help white Americans like me become more effective in our conversations with white people in our lives, to help us build an embodied anti-racist white culture, in the words of Resma Menachem. I'm featuring the people who inspire and teach me the most, like Lynne. White Americans, the battle for our democracy will not be won in courtrooms or in the streets. It must be won in white living rooms, at our neighborhood meetings, at our school board meetings, across the dinner table. As an anti racist, collecting my cousins often falls to the end of my to do list. Oh, I'll get to that next month. But I want to invite everyone watching here today to write a list of your friends and family you will collect this year. There are 21 million Americans, largely white, who believe that Donald Trump is the legitimate president and that political violence may be necessary to restore him. We are frontline in that battle. And with that said, I'm super grateful that Lynne Maureen Hurdle is here today. She is one of the people I have been blessed to learn the most from when it comes to how to embrace conflict and how to lovingly talk with the people in our lives about something that we feel really passionate about, and bring them along with us in that journey. So I'd just love if you would share a little bit about yourself and what you do, and then we can dive in from there.
Well, certainly. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Oh, good morning, or wherever you are, whatever time of day or night it is. I hope that it is a good space and place for you. I'm Lynne Maureen Hurdle, Bronx born and raised, and I am known as the conflict closer. And what I do is I help people to engage in everyday conversations, difficult conversations, in productive ways, ways that can still lead to profit, and ways that help us to engage in love and in necessary conversations. Right? How we meet conflict frontward, right? How we go toward conflict and we actually develop a better relationship with it. I am an author and I am a TEDx speaker, and I'm a mom. and and I've been doing 40 I've been doing this for over 40 years of really bringing people together around conversations around conflict. Oh,
Yes.
and I'm sorry, I'm also the creator of On the Matter of Race, which is a program that I developed 3 years ago at the request actually of two white women who are friends and colleagues who, for the first time in their lives, they were developing friendships with people of color and they wanted to engage in conversations with them around racism, but they knew nothing about it and felt like they had no place in the conversation or even in learning about it. And so it's a 6 month journey for white people who are interested in learning about racism and who want to take some kind of action. And just like you said, right? At our dinner tables, in our neighborhoods and school boards with family members. That's what On the Matter of Race is really about. And when we start talking about having those kinds of conversations.
Thank you so much for providing that valuable education and experience to white people. I really, really appreciate it. And I think where I'd like to start is that growing up for me, I was very conflict averse.
Mhm.
I thought that, my main goal is I wanted people to like me and that if I engaged in conflict, then they wouldn't like me. So I needed to, appease them or not really say what I thought because I didn't want to have conflict. Do you see that pattern among a lot of people?
That's the majority of people. Yeah. People feel quite at home when they work with me because it is absolutely what most of the clients that I work with talk about. That's how a lot of us grew up, right? We were taught, it was modeled for us that conflict was bad and it's the last thing you want in your life. And so people really are conflict averse.
So what was it about you? What taught you to embrace conflict?
Yeah. Well, I certainly didn't. It wasn't modeled for me. I grew up in a household where it was clear my mom was in charge, and unfortunately, what was modeled for her was yelling and shutting everything and everyone down. And so that's what she did. So we didn't learn about conflict. And my dad, he was much more with wanting peace by just totally avoiding and telling us to avoid and not answer back. So I didn't have that models. And then my extended family was large, but when they get together, oh my gosh, so much conflict. So I didn't have that model, but I knew that there was something in me that wanted something different, right? And I'm a talker, and I'm creative. I'm an actress. I was always doing some kind of something entertainment wise. So I'm always wanting to be out there expressing, and I just didn't know how to express when it came to conflict and conversation. So two things happened for me. One, really serious, and but also really the beginning of my work in conflict resolution is when I was 17. As I said, I'm from the Bronx, still here now, but at 17 on a bus in the Bronx, and at a time where there was definitely racial trouble. We had moved from an predominantly black uh, neighborhood to an all-white neighborhood, and I'm on the bus, and it is surrounded by at least 50 white young men in bandanas with baseball bats, and they're trying to turn the bus over
No.
because the bus driver wouldn't let them in. Fortunately, he was black, but then it was myself and another teenager were the only black people on the bus, and the bus was packed. So when he wouldn't open the door, they tried to turn it over, and the only thing that stopped them was across the street. Another bus came that was filled with African Americans that were, bused from another neighborhood to a high school in the neighborhood. And so they ran over there. And when I got off the bus, this other teen, this young man who I'm friends with to this day, he was new to the neighborhood. And I'd lived there 10 years by then. And he was terrified because he
Mm.
had no idea how to get home because we weren't anywhere near either of our stops. And I knew how to get him home through the back streets, and I did. And on my way from his house to my home, I heard this voice say, I don't know how, but I think I'm supposed to bring people together around this issue. And believe me, that was the furthest thing from my mind. I
Mm.
grew up, I started dance school at 3. I was acting, I was writing plays, and so I knew that I was going to be in the entertainment world. So the last thing I was thinking about was helping people around these issues. But I had gotten accepted into Syracuse University, and I went there as a theater major, and I ended up changing majors at the end of my sophomore year because they had a brand new major called nonviolent conflict and change. And
Mm.
and I've been doing the work ever since, and it's not easy. I'm not here to just teach other people. I'm a student of it myself each and every day, and
Mm.
I continue to widen my lens, get better at the conversations. The same kind of feelings come up in me that come up in other people when conflict happens, but it's better now. Like I can see the opportunities in it should I choose to have the conversations, and should I choose to help people engage in those conversations.
Wow, what a story. That is so intense. And I
Yes.
love that you developed a lifelong friend out of that situation as well.
Yeah, he ended up going to Syracuse as well. He was a year behind me in school, and he ended up going to Syracuse. And to this day, he introduces me as the person who saved his life.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So what do you see people get wrong about conflict?
Hmm. One of the things, and I don't know that it's wrong, but I don't think that people really have enough information about how to engage in conflict well. And that is that emotions are going to come up first before the words, right? That will really help you to have a productive conversation. I'm not saying words don't come up, but those often are not the words that you want to lead with in a conversation. So understand that it involves not just what you want and need to say, but also really tuning into your emotions and managing them in a way that gives you access to the best decision making, right? So when we
Mm,
get emotionally flooded, I always like the visual of our emotions are here, right? And but our ears are down here. So if the emotions are over our ears, we're not able to really listen. And then we're not able to access what is the best thing to say in this situation. And I want to say that I'm not telling you that you cannot be passionate or that you cannot feel a certain way about the conflict that you're engaged in. But if your goal is to resolve the conflict or to have a conversation that's productive, then you have to manage your emotions in a way where you're able to speak and be heard, and then also listen and discern and then respond rather than just react.
mm, mm, mm. That's deep. Because I know for me, I think that's part of the reason why I tend to avoid these conversations because I don't trust myself.
Mhm.
And also, I anticipate that there's going to be a strong reaction on the other party. So,
Yes.
so going into a conflict conversation, knowing that that's likely to happen, what
Mhm.
are some ways that I can prepare myself
Mhm.
for the conversation?
Yeah. Well, first is what's your goal here? Is your goal to be right? Is your
Mm,
goal to tell them off? Is it like understand what your goal is? Your goal to actually engage in a conversation that can hopefully resolve this conflict. And I think people really don't assess what they're doing right beforehand. So, and most of us want to be right. Who doesn't want to be right? Or if it's really something that you feel strongly and passionately about, you may, or you're offended, right? You may want to just tell the person off, but don't fool yourself into thinking you really want to have a conversation that can resolve this when that's not really your intent. So
mm,
understand what it is you're going in there for. And so if you in fact want to resolve this, then you have to go in with that mindset. Mindset is critical beforehand, and it's critical throughout, because when things get heated, when things might go off track, when they react in a way that starts to trigger you, you have to keep in mind what you're in this conversation for. And if that changes in the middle, then acknowledge that, know that, and then always afterwards assess how you did. I don't mean beat yourself up if you didn't get it right, right? I mean assess. So, what are the things that I like about what I did? What are the things that I'd like to do better in the next conflict conversation?
I love that. I love that to treat it as a learning opportunity,
Mhm.
and as an opportunity for growth.
Yep.
Really starts with taking that pause for reflection, which we so often in our busy lives don't do.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think that that is extremely valuable advice. Are there any framing ways of saying things that you recommend when you're trying to persuade someone of something that is different from their beliefs?
I want to take a step back too, because one of the things that I work with every client is the power of the breath. We really
Mm.
fully do not understand the power that we have right here within us to regulate our breathing so that we can bring ourselves to a place where we are able to say the things that we need to say, be less triggered, because it's hard not to be triggered by things that people say, but also when we are triggered to really access our the place that we want to be right within ourselves.
Mm.
So I do a lot of work around just simple belly breathing and being able to breathe in through the nose to the 4 count, hold it for 4, and then release through the mouth to 4 count, and then do that 4 times. So before, a lot of times during, and because we want to just go at it, like pausing and breathing could save a conversation. And so many people find that to be valuable, and it's one of those things where you don't have to carry it around. You don't have to, you don't have to go get something and carry it around with you. Like the breath is here; it's accessible to us. It's just we've got to remember to really use it. So that's one thing that I want to say. And in terms of framing, well, first of all, we go at often in these conversations, we go at things that the conflict isn't really about. So in terms of framing, I'm always saying I do my best to listen more than talk, even though I may feel like that this is something I need to be the one that's talking. But what are you talking about? How, are you responding rather than reacting? Because
Mm.
responding is helpful to having a conversation. Reacting can often trigger the other person and yourself. And believe me, I understand cultural norms and cultural differences, right? For some cultures, what is responding may sound like reacting because there's the norm around the volume of the voice, right? People, I love reading the stories or hearing the stories of people who may be in intercultural, interracial relationships, and they may have grown up in the culture of quiet, or that you don't react, or that you save you save yourself by just not engaging in a way that is going to make the other person look bad. And then they're in this relationship with someone, and let's just say they're at a gathering and the family comes over, and everybody's engaging in conversation, and it sounds like the biggest argument is going on, but in fact people are just passionate in the way that they talk, and it may even believe that if you aren't passionate, then it's not important to you. So I understand that cultural norms will dictate, but understanding each other's cultural norms is going to be important in having the conversation. So when you talk about framing things, right, the listening, look at your attitude going in. Here's the ones that don't tend to work. Let me school you, right? If you go in with that attitude,
That doesn't work, Lynn. I can't believe you.
ooh, yeah, 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 it's difficult. I know best.
Yes.
Do you? And do you in every situation? And do you even know this person's situation? And so that's not a good one. I'm the savior, right? Like for people of color, when we start talking about if you're standing up for people of color in a conversation around racism, like I'm the savior. And a lot of times white people don't even recognize that that's the place that they're coming from. But if you can get to that place of recognizing, understand that's not the attitude of the frame that you want to come from. You're going to listen and I'm going to talk,
Mm.
right? And we often will see that where we really feel like we're right and other people have made a gross mistake. And then there's another one. I have a right to say what I want, but is your voice really needed here? on this, because I feel like we're living in a time where, because of social media, which I see both. I see the good and the bad, but because of social media, we have more access to voice, and so it's difficult for a lot of us to really like scroll by or see where there's places where we really actually don't need to voice things. Like, I mean, we're all subject to it. I mean, as long as social media has been here, it's still relatively new, right, in our society. So learning how to not be a part of every conversation, but rather to really say, well, let me see what other people are saying, and is do I need to really say something? Here are other people standing up or voicing their opinions, and I don't need to get in this. Like, I think we're learning the ways to really operate on social media so that we can have access to a good, valuable, productive conversation, rather than have the reputation of someone who just really has to say something no matter what.
100%. My rule of thumb is those who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution.
I
So
like that.
my voice is needed on the problems that I am closest to.
Mhm,
White
mhm.
supremacy, white women, uh, uh, patriarchy, those types of things. I have something to say about that because those are the problems that I'm closest to.
Mhm.
When it comes to other challenges, my role there is to listen and amplify
Mhm.
those who are closest to those problems, who are closest to the solutions of those problems.
Yes. Yeah. And also, to wait for an invitation at times. Like that,
Mhm.
well, sometimes we just do not wait for an invitation, and we may be standing up or supporting someone who feels like I didn't need that.
Yeah.
Right? I was doing just fine. And so it's a balance. It's trying to really you got to engage in these conversations in order to make mistakes, which nobody wants to make, right? In order to figure out where's your voice in this, what's needed from you.
Yes. And to your point about where your voice is needed, I think we have to develop relationships offline. Like we
Mhm.
can't just
Right.
interject ourselves in an online conversation when we have
Yes.
no relationship with these folks. They don't know who we are. Y-
That's right.
You know,
That's right.
yeah. I think those are some thoughts I have about those online conversations.
Hmm.
And I think it's really important to develop offline relationships. I would say that for example, how I met you.
Yes.
We met each other from LinkedIn, and then when I was traveling to New York, I said, "Hey, let's get together and get to know each other."
Hmm.
So I highly recommend that that people do things like that because as useful as social media is in terms of building your network,
Hmm.
you don't really know someone until you sit down and look them in the eye and have a real conversation.
Agreed. Yeah.
Okay, so coming into it now, um, when you're talking with white people about how to have conversations with white people in their lives about race. Do you have any pointers for those conversations?
Yeah. So I talked earlier about On the Matter of Race, which is a 6 month journey for white people who want to learn about racism and also take some action. And in that 6 months at our level 1 program, we start to look at how to have the conversations, and then we go up to level 5, and so throughout we are doing that. And one of the things is, I can tell you that people feel passion, especially once they start learning. Right, white people have these veils lifted, and it's like, oh my God, like how did I how did I not see this? And there's all kinds of feelings that come up with that, and that can lead to trying to hit people over the head with this stuff, right? They look at loved ones who they've not known how to address before, and now feel empowered. Nothing wrong with that, but it ends up being a preaching session or a yelling match, and so. I talk about the fact that you gotta really understand what you're trying to do here. What you're trying to do is to open the door to a conversation that hopefully will continue, like that people will come back for. Because if you think that you are going to convince someone, particularly on racism, of your view in just one conversation, I mean, that's just not likely to happen. And you also want to know where they're coming from. So I know the difference, right? First of all, between having a conversation and stopping a racist incident. Those are not the same thing, right? So
Mm.
if you honestly want to engage in a conversation, then understand that you're listening first more than talking, right? And not interrupting, because most of us only listen to the point where we wish to interrupt the other person. And I say most of us included, it's still something I work on, especially when I feel passionate, right? But we really do have to listen past the point of where we want to interrupt so that we can try to get some clarity. Ask
Mm.
questions, right? Ask questions for understanding, not to try to trap someone so you can debate them and give them new information, but like understanding of where this even came from for them, why they believe what they believe, right? And getting some clarity around what they believe. And then responding to points, right? Not responding to the act, right? That is just so racist. It may in fact be, but what's the point that you really want to have the conversation around? And then asking if they would like some resources that like you've come across some, not you need to read this book, right? It's just asking if they want to have some more resources, and then having that kind of back and forth. And of course it can get really heated around racism, and you do feel passionately, but what you're trying to do is to leave the door open for another conversation. And one thing for sure, no name calling, please. Oh, you're just an idiot, like, oh my gosh, where's that going to go? And I can tell you that it has been, I mean, right now we have people that started with me in level 1 who are now at level 5, and we have everything in between. And I can tell you that it has been really successful for people. Not every conversation is successful, but one of the things that happens is people start to understand where you're coming from. Like, this is where I'm coming from, and either they come back a lot of times to prove you wrong, but or other times to just kind of engage and see where you are, or they tell other people, oh, well, Karen's gonna speak up about that. So, and that's not a bad thing to get the reputation for the person who is going to address it, because you would be surprised. I think folks would be surprised how much there is actually respect and admiration for that, even in people who don't always agree with what you're saying. If people have had given food for thought, right, and planted seeds, hey, I think that that is critical. And while some folks may not come from this space, some folks may say, I don't care, I'm just going to say it like it is, that then make that decision in a space where that's the decision that I am coming from,
Mm.
right? As opposed to my emotions that got me to the place where I just don't care. Love our emotions. They're here for us to help us. I'm not trying to tell people that there's no space for emotions. I'm trying to say that we actually have the capacity to help our emotions work for us rather than against us in situations. So really, just uh, honestly, being here for a conversation is what's really important.
I love everything you just said. And I frequently say that too, that what I see my work is doing is planting seeds. Like I can't control how someone is going to take it, but I do know that in my own life, when I was earlier in my journey, people would say things to me that at that point didn't make sense to me, or
Mhm.
I wasn't um I didn't have enough lived experience to really understand what they were saying.
Yeah.
And then later on something would happen and I would be like, "Oh, that's what that was about. Now it would make sense
Mhm.
to me."
Mhm.
So I love what you're saying about planting seeds and being open to the conversation that then people want to come back to.
Yeah.
I was in that flamethrower stage for a
Mhm.
very long time,
Mhm.
you
Yeah,
know.
that's yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
where
Yeah.
I was like, I you know, hated white people. And I
Mm.
just was so angry and wanting to distance myself from white
Mhm.
people.
Mhm.
Oh, I'm not like them. I'm a good person.
Yeah,
Blah blah
yeah,
blah.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
And I see that stage a lot among recent white allies, or like trying to distinguish ourselves from other white allies. And I
Mhm.
just want to encourage people to practice self-compassion and compassion with others. And what we're trying to do is build a collective white culture,
Yeah.
not like an individual white culture. And that's been a big learning curve for me, something that I'm still trying to figure out too.
Yeah, I mean, coming from a culture that has been vilified, I identify as an African American woman, and I'm coming in from a culture that's been vilified, and everything about us, from our hair to our body structures to how we speak, how our skin color, like everything
Mm,
about us. I think it is incredibly detrimental to feel like you hate the people who you look like, right?
mm,
It's detrimental, and I've seen the effects in my own community, and it's something that we work really hard to fight against, and to find our pride in who we are, and to be who we are in ways that we feel we want and need to be, without being responsible for the collective, but also being responsible to the collective, and
mm,
recognizing that, as much as I know that it is part of white supremacy, that none of us as Black Americans can be individuals, right? I know that's part of white supremacy. I insist on my individuality at the same time that I insist on my pride in being African American. Like I insist
mm,
bringing the collective up together, and being proud of that. So I think it is very important for white people to own the history of this country and the atrocities that have been committed under the name of white supremacy, and the privilege of having white skin. I think that's important. But the work that we also do in On the Matter of Race is how do you then feel good about being a white person, other than feeling like you have to be a savior, right? And distance yourself from the bad ones, right?
mm,
But
mm,
how does that work, right? Because a lot of times we're talking about whiteness and how it works, as opposed to being someone who identifies as a white person. So there's a lot of complexity in that, but I know that I understand what you just said, and I know that white people have to deal with the feelings that come up once they learn about the history, right? Because it's a lot. That's why people don't want it taught, right?
exactly. They're like, wait, we just want to we want to put a lid on that and make sure these all these secrets don't get out. But honestly, I feel that is extremely harmful.
Hmm.
That is extremely harmful because eventually young people are going to learn this history.
Yeah.
And if in my own family, so I was adopted,
Hmm.
and my parents never hid the fact that I was adopted.
Right.
They told me from the time I could talk that I was adopted. So it was never a stigma. It was never like this terrible thing, this secret, or that I was somehow less loved because I was adopted. So I approached racism, teaching my kids about white people, America's racial history, what's going on with contemporary racism from the time they could talk. We were talking about this because I didn't feel like if I shielded them from this,
Yeah.
then all of a sudden when they found out about it, it was going to be this huge shock.
Yeah.
You know, I think children have an innate sense of justice. And
Yeah.
if you can contextualize what they are experiencing with facts, that you're setting them up for a lifetime of success.
Yes.
That's been my practice. And yeah, when I see these parents getting so upset about their kids learning about gay or trans or racism, I'm like, what, like, do you think your kids are never going to find this stuff out? Like,
Right. Right. Exactly. And they're capable. So here's the thing that I think that gets missed in that conversation. And again, when you grow up under white supremacy, this the intention is to hide this fact. Is that to see people say, "Well, we do not want white children feeling badly about themselves," really cuts out the the truth that Black, Indigenous, other people of color in this country have been doing that, have been made to feel that way their entire lives, and you don't care about that. And they actually, yes, there have been problems around that, of course, but there's a real empowerment around understanding the truth, right? So understanding that the narrative about you is a lie, and that's for all of our kids to understand that the narrative that whiteness is the superior model, and that everything is great about that, and that slavery was a long time ago, and everybody's had the same access and rights and freedom since then, and I mean all of that. uh, you got to learn the truth and actually withstand it and stand in it, and we all can. Our kids have been doing it for a long time, and unfortunately suffering from those narratives, but children can come through that, as you said, in the way that if the parents introduce it, we really have to work with educators to be able to do the work and introduce it in a way that can help deal with the feelings and the questions that come up among white children. And again, that's something else. We have quite a lot of parents in on the matter of race, and they are working with their children around it. So it can be done.
yes, it
It can
can
be
be
done.
done.
I'm always saying to my on the matter of race family, like, y'all will live, you'll survive, you'll be okay. Like, guess what? You'll be okay. Yeah.
You'll be okay. Yes, my proudest moments of as a parent is when my kids call me out.
Mm,
Mom, that's so fat phobic.
hmm.
Mom, I can't believe you said that. It to me it shows that they are, they're just so much further advanced than
Yeah.
I was, certainly at their age and
Mhm.
even now. Like
Yeah.
their antenna, their radar is so highly developed. And that, yeah, my kids are not depressed.
Yeah.
Do not feel bad about themselves.
Uh-huh.
They are highly resilient, and I did want to touch on that. So I remember, um, I think it was summer of 2020. A friend put me in touch with a high school student, a white high school student,
Mhm.
who was going through his racial reckoning, and he was feeling so bad
Yeah.
about being a white person.
Mhm.
Can what would you say to a young white person who is feeling deep sense of shame?
Yeah, I think that I say this to everybody, around my work with conflict is we really do have to learn how to sit in our feelings and
Mm,
feel what that feels like, and then move ourselves through that. So, what is it that you're doing? Yeah, that's a legitimate feeling that comes up. And how do you feel your feelings? Like, instead of ignoring or diverting yourself or pushing yourself to substances or whatever, rather than feel. So, how do you feel that? Move yourself through it, and then continue to learn and decide how you want to act. I mean, I have to say that being able to have conversations with white people around racism in a way where they actually are getting it and not trying to intervene in ways that make them feel better or contradict my reality, right? I'm not the
Mhm.
expert on racism. You are, as a white person. No, right? Like, those are the things that happen in conversations where white people are not doing their work. And sometimes even when they are, right?
Mm.
Because we all are going to make mistakes. So I would say to that student, like, you've got to be able to sit in those feelings, acknowledge that that's what comes up for you, but move yourself through that and continue to do the work, continue to learn, honor that you've made mistakes and you've helped uphold racism, right? In whatever ways, but to be the person that understands that just being a nice person and treating other people who don't look like you the same as you want to be treated does nothing about racism. But
Mm.
really being able to sit in those feelings and then being able to learn more, do more, is really important. And even a conversation, right, with other white people, or if friends of BIPOC want to choose to engage in conversation with you, that's an important part of being white, right? And learning, really understanding the history. No one's going to say, I don't ever tell folks in my group that you are just going to feel so good. I also don't tell them that all you're going to do is feel bad. I tell, look, let's name what we're feeling right now. We start off every session with, what are you sitting with? What are you feeling? Right? And there's a range, and I'm like, if you feel all the feels in this work, then we're doing the work, because they all come up. There's no question.
Yes, yes. I'm so glad you mentioned that we tend to associate anti-racism with super negative feelings like shame and guilt and those feelings,
Right. They're
and
all part of it.
eh, which are part of it. And as we work through that, there is so much joy. There is so much connection.
Yeah.
There's so much how can feeling of community,
Yes.
and I want us to, like, we are the joyful ones. Like,
Mhm.
they the how can I put it, the racist folks try to make it sound like those folks over there, the anti-racist, are the miserable ones.
Mhm.
I don't feel miserable. i
Mhm.
i feel I mean, there's times when I feel miserable, but I feel like my work has made me a much happier,
Mhm.
more joyful person, and has also made me feel like a part of a long legacy of folks who came before me, and connected contemporarily with the
Yeah.
folks who are engaged in this now. I love being a part of this community.
Yes. Yep. I would agree. And I think that we have got to be able to understand that it's all of those things, all of the feelings, and we're trying to get our folks, right, BIPOC folks. We're trying to get our folks to feel that about ourselves, because we also suffer from having to live with these narratives of who our group is, and isn't, and how we can really empower ourselves to feel what we're feeling, but move through that too. There's a lot to this work, and one of the things that You're welcome, Jazz. One of the things that I think is important too is understanding the feelings that come up before you engage in conversation of, I don't want to offend anyone. I don't want to make a mistake. Yeah, because that
Mm.
often stops people from saying, I mean, that's one of the things that I know that white people are struggling with all the time when the veils start getting lifted and they start to want to have conversation. Often, I find that comes up when they want to engage in conversation with BIPOC folks in their life. There's a real fear. I'm gonna say something wrong, and you may. That's part of the work, or that you get challenged by someone who's white who really may not be doing the work and is going to throw some stuff at you, and that you're just like, oh God, I don't know how to respond to that. Well, the fact that you started the conversation and had the willingness to get past that fear of making mistakes is really important. It's important for us to know that you're willing to
Mm.
invest in the conversation, even if the mistakes are made. And Karen, I've seen you just come back and come back. You listen, you get hit with some stuff, you know. Particularly from folks of color, and you just listen and try to take in feedback and know where you might want to say something different or do something differently, and know where you stand, right? And understand
Mm.
that you're still committed to doing this, and you're still committed to just having those conversations, even when you're afraid.
Thank you. Yes, yes. Well, I had a major turning point where I started to approach feedback as a precious gift and
Mm,
not as something to be feared and not as a personal attack, but
right.
someone is trying to teach me something. Like, clearly, I have many things to learn in this life. And if
Mhm.
someone is kind enough to teach me something, I need to embrace that. Now,
Yes.
then I do have to practice discernment, right? Because maybe I don't agree with every single thing that people are trying to teach me, but I at least have to listen to it and evaluate it
Yeah.
and take from it, and especially if I'm hearing the same thing over and over again. Hello.
Yeah, hello. Hello, yes. And understand that, white supremacy teaches white people consciously and subconsciously that they're the experts on every single.
Yes. Yes, and I am so guilty of that. I mean, I'm a
Yeah.
lawyer, it's like,
Oh,
yeah.
on top of it, right? Yes, and I will say that we are all brought up under that system right here in the
Mm,
United States. So it isn't just white people that can. I don't think that we have the same we idea that we are the experts on everything, but I do feel like we are taught to challenge folks who's who are the experts on things. Like I will say that I've lovingly received feedback from the LGBTQIA community, and I am grateful for that. That's not a place, although I have so much family and friends who are a part of that community. It's not my place of expertise, and so I've made my own mistakes and been lovingly corrected, and I stand to say, hey, you're the expert on your experience. I am truly not. I will say it is not as frustrating for me to engage in that community as it is in the white community, because
mm,
it is so much a part of the fabric of this country that white people not only are the experts, but then they get supported for that from other
mm.
white, from the political system, from every system in this country. And so it's really difficult not to feel like that, whether you are conscious of it or not. It's difficult because
Yeah.
you are not your voice, your thought is supported, right? Whereas for the rest of us. It's just not, unless it's from our own individual communities, or certainly where intersectionality comes in and folks support other folks of color around what it is that they're saying. And I have to say, I'm so happy to see so much more of that on LinkedIn, real the intersectionality conversations that are happening
Yes.
in racism. Yeah.
Yes, the whole tone of LinkedIn has changed so dramatically.
Mhm,
It is
mhm.
so awesome to see. Although, of course, there's still plenty of other voices on there too, but just
The
the
naysayers, yes.
yes. It,
Why
it,
is this a part of LinkedIn? This
oh
is
my
such a
God,
public
please.
business. Oh my goodness.
Yes. Oh,
Everything
so
to
much.
do with it. Everything to do with it. And I know that oftentimes I'm met with, why do Black people make everything about race? Because it is.
Yeah,
And
because you all made everything about
because it is. Every system that in every institution in this country, right, operates under systemic racism, right,
Mm.
governed by white supremacy. So if you ask me that question, that's the answer I'm going to give. You may not like it, but I stand by it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.
This has been such a rich conversation. I have two closing questions for you. One, I want to go back to what you were saying about how can we build a positive white racial identity that is not rooted in white supremacy?
Mhm. Yeah. Well, first of all, I think you got to learn about white supremacy and the role that it has and continues to play in this country. Uh, as I said, once you're learning, you've got to be able to sit in the feelings that come up for you and understand that that is not your full makeup, right? Feeling shame or guilt, that's a part of the work, but staying there really limits you. So being able to move that past that, understanding you're not the expert on this, so to really listen and learn, from folks who are living with this and are also learning, because a lot of times white people think that we get all of this information growing up. We've got to learn it because, again, growing up under white supremacy, the information is hidden. We go to these same schools, right? We learn that same whitewashed history, and then really start to believe it. So understanding that you really are we're governed by it. We grow up on it, and to know that what you're doing is the work of countering it, and that it's work that's going to be lifelong. That's the other
Mhm.
piece. It is not something that you're going to come out on the other side of feeling guilt and shame and then be freed from everything and know everything. It is lifelong work. So learning how to deal with the feelings that come up, right, is important. Also understand, as you said, there have been plenty of, what's that saying? Look for the helpers. There are plenty of helpers who look like you if you're white, who throughout history, who have, all the way back to slavery, right? So just really understand that you also have that legacy too, and to connect with that, and that's what history is keeping you from it. And people who want to keep you from history, they're keeping you from really connecting and knowing about folks who are white, who have also been a part of really doing the work, the anti-racist work.
Thank you so much. I love all of that. My last question for you: if you could wave a magic wand and get white people to either start doing something or stop doing something, what would it be and why?
um, Stop assuming that uh, know this conversation,
Mm,
right? Without even doing any work to educate yourself about it, without having even friendships and conversations within those friendships about racism. I'd like you to stop inserting yourself into conversations that you really don't need to be inserted into, because you don't understand the culture of the folks who are trying to have the conversation. And so that would be the stop, and to start listening to the people who actually live with racism being a consequence of their lives, right?
Mhm.
Really start listening for the sake of understanding, not for the sake of debating or countering, but understanding, and do some work. Get into do work with Karen. I'd love to invite you into On the Matter of Race so you can actually learn with other white people who are really trying to learn. Like, don't assume that you are the expert on this, but understand you got stuff to learn, and it's a whole lot, and that's okay as long as you're willing to learn.
Yes. How can people get in touch with you and learn more about On the Matter of Race?
Yeah, LynneMaureenHurdle.com. Just like it's spelled there, LynneMaureenHurdle.com is my website. I'm on LinkedIn as Lynne Maureen Hurdle, on Instagram at Conflict Closer, and on the matter of race, you will learn about, as I said, on my website. Our next level one is in September, but we're also going to have a summit at the end of July for folks who want to learn more and hear from experts who are talking about this, including some of the folks who are in on the matter of race.
Awesome. Lynne, thank you so much. You shared so much wisdom with everybody today, and it was a transformational conversation. I know for me personally, I'm so grateful to you for everything I've learned from you today and throughout our time of being in relationship with each other.
Yeah, thank you so much. I also blog about this, so if you go on my website and sign up for my giveaway around having difficult conversations, you will get on the list and you will receive my weekly blog. I talk about conflict and how to all things conflict around that. So thank you,
Yes.
Karen. As always, I love working with you.
I love working with you. And I'm embracing you and
Yes, same
embracing
here.
conflict.
Yes, I love it. Thank you for the opportunity, and thanks for everyone who's tuned in, either live or on the replay.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Oh, next week, April 14th, I will be joined by Amanda Hambrick Ashcraft, who is an ordained Baptist minister, and she's a white woman from Kentucky. And we're going to have a big conversation about white women and the politics of today. So
Ooh,
please
I'm
join us
excited.
April 14th. Okay, bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.